James P. Thomas, and in the Navy I was a first-class petty officer, radarman originally, they became operating specialist, and then in the Air Force I retired as a major. After coming back to Pearl Harbor, which was our home port, I went to Radar A School and volunteered for Swift boats. And in November of '67, or actually September of '67, I started Swift boat training in Coronado and went through training there and graduated in November of '67. We graduated on a Friday and I was in Vietnam on Tuesday. When I landed in Cameron, we were assigned to our units, and I went down to, I was sent down to Antoy. Well, they're just finishing the airstrip. They're extending the airstrip down there to handle C-130s. This is in November of, or actually about, but this time it would be about the 1st of December of 1967. And so we couldn't land at Antoy. We had to land at Rockshall. And we had to land on a dirt road because that morning the Viet Cong had come in and blew up the Bird Dog airship and a couple of their airplanes. And so we landed on this dirt road in a C-47, get off the plane, and a Swift boat was supposed to come in the next night to, or the next morning I should say, to pick me and a couple other people up to take us to Antoy. So we get off the plane and somebody says, "Do you have a weapon?" And I said, "I only have a .38. And he says, "Well, here's a shotgun. We're going to have to put you up in the hotel downtown. Don't open the door for anybody, you know, until we come and get you." And as we were going into town, the Arvin Army column was heading out, chasing the VC out of town. Then they had a shootout that morning. And so, golly, I've only been in the country for about 3 days and there's stuff going on already. So as fate would have it, the 10 boat, PCF 10 comes in. And Lieutenant Wright was the skipper. And we started heading over to, and that's the one they made a model out of. And we started heading over to Antoy. And it turns out that that was the first crew I had. I was on Lieutenant Wright's crew. And we would I was on his crew until that crew rotated back to the States. One, during the 68th Tet Offensive, that's where I got wounded. We were on a night recon up the Sonondoc River. It was February 16th, 1968, and as you remember, the thing started out in January 31st, and I was in Saigon the night the Tet Offensive broke out. We were sitting in the President Hotel on the 9th floor having a steak dinner in the restaurant, and all of a sudden you look out there and you see flares popping up. And by the time we got back to the airstrip, they had already put a concertina wire in front of the gate and put buses in front of the gate to stop what was happening. And so we got through the gate and said, "Hey, don't shoot, we're Americans." And we ended up spending the night in a bunker being shelled, and then we took off for Antoy the next morning. And I got down there about 10 o'clock, and my skipper greets me and says, "Get your gear, we're heading down to the Sonondoc area." And getting underway at noon. And that's when we ended up going down there. We deploy down there and operate off the Androscoggin, or one of the Coast Guard WHECs. We take 2 crews down there and 1 boat. We rotate every 24 hours. And we were on a night recon up the Sonondoc River looking for whatever we could find, I guess you'd say. We found it, so got into a firefight. I got shrapnel in my eye, a couple other places. Was taken out the Androscoggin and put into surgery. Kind of taken out the game for about 3 weeks. There was a Coast Guard officer, the doctor took the shrapnel out of my eye, basically saved my eyesight. And then later on I went up to the 3rd Field Hospital in Saigon to have it checked out. And then as I was basically okay back on patrol in about 3 weeks, I was blind for about 48 hours. It's funny, there was no great marquee saying, "Coming attractions, the biggest battle of the Vietnam War." I mean, all you knew that something was happening. The poop was hitting the prop all over the country. And we didn't know what was going on. I mean, there were, in fact, just prior to that, in December 10th, we were in a 14-hour firefight on the 10 boat up in Dong Dong, where the VC tried to overrun the Special Forces camp, and we got called in to provide gunfire support, possible evacuation, and we had to be rearmed twice to get, we ended up getting up there about 6 in the morning and breaking contact about 8:30 that night. More like 9 o'clock that night, got back to Antoi. It was a long firefight. And what the VC were trying to do was break out those people they had in the POW camps. And the Special Forces camp held them off with our support. We fired all kinds of rounds of mortar that day and all kinds of 50 caliber. We were by ourselves. What happened was we were basically on top of Phu Quoc Island. There was a patrol area right along the Cambodian border. And you'd sit there and we'd basically drop anchor and just kind of observe what was going on. You could see the trucks coming down the scenic trail, you know, bringing supplies into the Viet Cong. And once in a while you get in a Mexican standoff with a Cambodian PGM, where we point our guns at each other and not do anything. And there was a period of time when I was on the 10 boat where they actually shot down a P-3 Orion. This was after 10. This was after 10. But the Cambodians shot down a P-3 Orion and she tried to land at Antoi. This is about 5:30 in the afternoon. We're getting ready to go to chow. Well, I and Larry Gilbertson were standing on the chow line. And all of a sudden the P-3 comes over with one out and one on fire. And she made 2 attempts to land at in Antoi and couldn't make it. And she ended up crashing in the water and everybody was killed. In fact, we found people floating in the water days later, but the Cambodians shot it down. So this was they were not our friends, so to speak. So anyway, we were sitting there at the top of the island and we were supposed to head back down to Antoi to be relieved. And usually you headed down and the other boat's coming up, we're supposed to start coming up. And you kind of, somewhere along the way, you transferred responsibility. And I got this message over the radio that there was a firefight going on at the Special Forces camp in Dong Dong. And they requested a swift boat for gunfire support and possible evacuation. This was January 10th, 1967. And, 1968, excuse me, January 10th, 1968. And I looked at the coordinates and realized we're not more than 15 minutes from there. And I went to my skipper and said, you know, we're right here. You know, what do you say we take it? We got a full warload. We haven't shot around on this patrol, and we got almost a full gas tank. And he said, yeah, that makes sense. Call Antoi and let them know we'll take it, because it would have taken them at least an hour and a half to scramble a boat and get it up to there. And said, we'll take it. The other boat can go up and take over patrol, and we'll go in there. We figured we'd go in there and fire a few rounds and drop a few rounds of mortar in and be home after lunch. Well, we got into a brawl there. It was, in fact, they had to come up and rearm us twice. And Ed Monday was on the 6th boat and came up. He told me some of the stuff that happened. He was watching us, stuff I forgot about. And he was talking about it. And so we ended up having to beach the boat under fire and pull them off. And then we went down farther south and offloaded them and flanked them and got them in kind of a crossfire. And we were able to save the day, but it took almost, we got there about maybe 6:30 in the morning and we broke contact about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. But we got back to Antoi and we weren't supposed to beach the boat. And Skipper got in trouble, and so did I, for turning off my radio when they started telling us not to beach the boat. And they're gonna put him in for a court martial. Well, he called the landline up to the major up at Special Forces camp there, who was pretty grateful for what we did that day. He called up to the Trang headquarters, Special Forces headquarters in the Trang, and basically put the skipper in for a Bronze Star. So that kind of negated everything. And so, you know, we got a real nice letter of appreciation in our record that detail what the firefight was all about. And that's in my record today. So that was what the 10 boat did. And we did, seemed like we spent an awful lot of time down south in the Salmondock Square Bay area, because every time we had a dignitary come to town, Lieutenant Wright wasn't very politically correct. And so they get our crew out of town so he wouldn't have to, he wouldn't spout off about the war.